Hello, and thank you for joining the Walk Weekly. I am Walter Latham, and I'm here with Sergeant Ernest Robinson, our co-host. And today we want to talk about this vigilante in the subway that killed, one of our guys who was mentally ill. Daniel Penny was initially charged with manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. The jury dismissed the manslaughter charge, and the jury found Penny not guilty of negligent homicide. So the defense for Daniel Penny argued that he acted in self-defense and defense of others. They claimed Jordan Neely's behavior was threatening, making passengers feel unsafe, and Penny's actions were portrayed as necessary to protect everyone on the train. And the prosecution argued Penny used excessive force. They suggested there were alternate ways to de-escalate the situation without a chokehold. All right, so the key testimony from other passengers, because other passengers also contributed in defense of Daniel Perry. The witness describes Neely's behavior as erratic and threatening. Some passengers felt scared for their safety and others. So the defense highlighted this testimony to support their defense of the claim. So witnesses reported Neely shouting about not caring about jail and wanting to die. Neely was seen pacing, yelling, and making aggressive movements. And one witness saw Neely make a move towards Penny for Penny's safety. But this is all coming out, it's coming out as to, why the determination was made. But, I just want to just show y'all guys just a quick clip. Me and Ernest are going to do.
Jordan Neely was a homeless man who struggled with mental illness. On the day he died, he entered a crowded subway car yelling that he was hungry, thirsty, and ready to die or go to jail. That's when another passenger, Daniel Penny, took him to the ground in a chokehold that lasted for almost 6 minutes. When Penny let go, Neely was unresponsive. He was later pronounced dead at a hospital. The verdict brings an end to a closely watched trial that touched on questions around public safety, mental health, race, and homelessness. Neely's father spoke moments after the decision.
I just want to say I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. Really, really hurts.
This guy was a former, he's a veteran Marine Corps, all right? And you happen to have been, sergeant in the Marines, combat veteran. So, looking at the situation and based on the information you were able to gather, what do you think about this decision that came down from the courts?
I think that the jury got it wrong. And I believe that the judge dismissing, so the judge dismissed the manslaughter. Manslaughter comes with a mandatory 15 years. And I think and there's no minimum. So I think that the reason why the judge dismissed the manslaughter was because of the jury being able to convict knowing that he was going to get a 15-year sentence. So that's just on that particular legal side. Where I believe that the jury got it wrong is because he is guilty of homicide. He is guilty of whether you want to call it homicide, manslaughter, and it's semantics to a particular point because you have to have a criminal intent in order to commit like capital one murder. You can commit homicide as a result of your negligent actions, right? And so that's the part where the criminal negligent homicide is because you have to have a criminal intent. And so where they may believe that he did obviously cause the death, because he did cause the death, it very well may not have been criminally intended to cause the death. But the other part is the negligent part. And where I do believe that he was negligent in his actions as a Marine.
And that the manslaughter charge was,
I believe would be fitting.
They didn't get a decision on the manslaughter?
They didn't get a decision on the manslaughter because the judge dismissed it because I believe that it would have been a harder time for the jury to give him 15 years. So, for example, for myself, I believe that he is guilty for killing Mr. Neely.
All right, and which charge would you bring if you were the DA? Which charge would you bring against him?
I would have brought the manslaughter charge, or would have looked to, because I have not looked at the entire code, legal code for New York as it pertains to harm and death. But I would have brought a charge that would have been more fitting, or that would have had leeway where either the jury and or judge would have been able to. There's a mandatory 15 years, and there was no way to find him guilty and then give him like a 5-year sentence with 10 years of probation or any variance of it, because it's mandatory. What I was about to say was that the training that we receive in the Marine Corps is pretty extensive. Even when we go through practice for a real life situation, we understand the negative outcomes, even in a training exercise, right? When we practice rear choke holds, counter the rear choke holds, things of that nature, that we have a tap out so that way we don't cause harm to our the person that's participating. And so he was very aware. He was very aware of those things because of the training that we had, that we all receive as Marines. And this goes all the way back to close quarter combat training that we received before the MAP program, which is the Marine Corps Martial Arts program, before that even came into existence, which he's partaking in. So he was aware of it. I believe that he was very negligent of it, and it is still out there where he can still be charged with the manslaughter.
Yeah, because that can bring that again, because it was like a mistrial.
So it was dismissed. It was dismissed, and it was that. So he can be, and so there will be no double jeopardy if he were to be charged with manslaughter.
One thing I did find out about this guy is he's from Long Island. He's from Suffolk County. And the thing is, these guys out here, they don't know black people that well. I think he was scared. I mean, even though he's a Marine veteran, people are scared of black people. And this guy, Neely, was so small, smaller than Michael Jackson, And then I see these guys on the train. I've seen them. I can give you a story. When I was living in Queens, I used to take the F train into Manhattan every day. All right. So I get on the F train, Roosevelt Avenue and Queens. And this guy, he was big. He was cursing, spitting. Actually, he was so bad that they made a circle, like people were standing back trying to get away, so he wouldn't spit on them and talk, And he was like, when we got to, I think it was 3rd Street, this big black guy got on. Businessman, right? Took the rail right in front of him and was looking at him. The guy just stopped. He knew this guy, this guy didn't play. He could size him up and say, no, I don't want to deal with this guy. Yeah. And he stopped. So this guy, they're not that crazy. All right. I say that to say that mental illness is a fact of life. I believe that what happened to Neely was unfortunate. But the way they're making it now is, okay, this guy Neely was so dangerous and he was going to kill somebody. Even Daniel Penny was saying he's trying to protect other passengers. Where did he come from with that nonsense?
No. So
you're not a cop.
No, and what you call it? I mean, one of his words were actually disingenuous, because with everyone has a right to have a mental crisis, because it's just something that it is a part of life, and it does happen. The mere threats, because there are two things that we learn, whether in law enforcement or whether in battle and combat. In combat, you have rules of engagement, which are covered by the Geneva Convention. In law enforcement, in that particular role in that moment in time, he was neither. He was neither under the Geneva Convention, nor was he a law enforcement officer. But I was bringing those two examples up because rules of engagement tells you how you to actually engage with an enemy. The escalation force continuum and lets you know how you're supposed to engage with whomever it may be considered a perpetrator or whatever have you. And the way that the escalation of force continuum works is that you can meet at the level or one step above whatever force is actually being used. So in verbal threat, So with a verbal threat, I can match as a law enforcement officer. I can match that particular level of force that you are using. If you are using your hands to engage, I can then either use my hands or I can then use an axe, or back in the day called a baton, or some other type of non-life-threatening instrument to being able to subdue whomever it is that the law enforcement officer is engaging with. So because Mr. Neely was merely having a mental crisis episode, and granted, he may have been having, saying threats, and it very well could have caused a lot of anxiety for people, because especially in New York, where, people are subject to a lot of, adverse behaviors or behaviors that are not necessarily common in everyone's life. But the mere fact that you are threatening with words is not a cause for physical harm, and definitely not a cause or reason for homicide. And that's what, I was saying, and that's what Mr. Penny did.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Penny committed homicide. He killed that
I
man.
agree.
And as a matter of fact, and there was one thing that he had said in there. He had said in the interview that the amount of guilt that he would have had if Mr. Neely somehow had caused harm to somebody else, but did not.
That is so disingenuous.
Right.
That's so disingenuous, man. I mean, right there.
Right. Any remorse for the fact that he took Mr. Neely's life when he did not have to. And even in many of the replaying of the skirmish that took place on the subway, he did not yield to receiving help from any other passengers. There was a gentleman who was standing right over them who was trying to grab the arm of Mr. Neal. He did not relent. He did not have any, and that's the part where the prosecutor is talking about the actual humanity or lack of humanity that Mr. Penny had for Mr. Neely, is that he did not relent. He kept going and kept a firm chokehold on it, where we know that, as we're taught, one, it only takes 8 to 10 seconds to apply an effective blood hold. So we're closing off the blood flow to the brain. It only takes 8 seconds to do that. The longer that you are holding a chokehold, you are then now impacting the airway, and where it does take minutes to actually suffocate somebody, and they can die from asphyxiation because of the fact that they have no air that is getting. So there's a difference from a blood hold versus a blood chokehold versus an air chokehold. And what he was doing was applying an air chokehold that then allowed for Mr. Neely to pass on.
All right, so would that mean now blood chokehold and air chokehold? I never heard those terms used that way before. So a blood chokehold, all right, it's still applied to the same area of the neck. Is that, or is it over the?
So a blood chokehold will go over the carotid artery. So so basically, so your arteries here are on the sides of your neck that lead up to the blood that gets to your brain. 8 to 10 seconds. If that is interrupted, it would actually incapacitate anybody within 8 to 10 seconds. Applied appropriately, 8 to 10 seconds, the person would knock out or lose consciousness. For some, it may just be for a moment, but at that particular time, because he had everyone that was around, he could have then moved to, restraining Mr. Neely in some other type of restraint. Anything could have been possible within 6 minutes. It is. Again, you have to have intent to say that I am going to remain here for 6 minutes. I don't know how many stops that train would have gone through in 6 minutes, especially in New York.
At least two stops. At least two stops.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at no point in time did anyone go get the conductor. No one pulled the emergency brake on it to sit there and say, hey, we have this issue that's going on here. Everyone just continued to get on the train, off the train, and for those who were standing around, just stood around. This is negligent. And especially, and it goes against everything that, as far as anyone who was in a combat a job or MOS or
Especially a
whatever have
Marine.
you.
Especially a Marine. Yeah.
I mean, well, I take it personally as being a Marine, yes, but even for our law enforcement, our firefighters, our EMTs, our Marines, our soldiers, our airmen, our coasties, if we're engaged, again, police officers, MPs, whomever, when we're engaged, the whole purpose is to de-escalate the situation and being able to move on. Like, even when we're taught combat techniques and skills on a combat field, it is to incapacitate and then move on, because we still have a fight to being able to. We're not taught to lay on our back for 6 minutes or whatever it can be. That nobody teaches that.
But he said he was scared because the guy was on top of him.
He wasn't
so
scared.
He couldn't let go.
He wasn't
That's
scared.
That's what he said.
No, that's what he said.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, and that was the thing. I mean, you can look at his face. He's in complete control. He knows what he is doing. He knows what he is doing. At that particular time that he engaged with Mr. Neely, because there has been no reports to sit there and say that Mr. Neely struck anyone. There is nothing to sit there and say. There are no reports saying that Mr. Neely had a weapon on him. There is no reports to sit there and say that he spat on anybody, that he committed any type of assault outside of accosting or causing, some type of disturbance or frenzy because of his loud outburst, which is a human right.
That's amazing, Ernest.
And it's a human right that people have. You can have a mental crisis. Now, you can't cause harm to people, but that goes the opposite way. That just because someone's having a mental crisis does not mean that someone gets to cause harm to them. And that's exactly what happened to Mr. Neely. And I believe that the jury got it wrong. But I also believe that the judge, by dismissing the manslaughter case, allowed for that charge to be brought up again, and just hopefully that whomever the DA or prosecutors are within that area would have the intestinal fortitude and the integrity to actually bring the charge appropriate to Mr. Penny for the justice for Mr. Neal.
All right. I agree totally. But I was a little confused on, whether the techniques that he used, the duration and all that kind of stuff was appropriate. But based on what you're saying, it sheds totally new light. I hope our audience understands that he was trained as a Marine veteran. They're trained. So he knew exactly what he was doing. There's no nonsense. He knew exactly what he was doing. If it wasn't plain outright fear or hatred, I mean, it's one of the two. It's got to be one of the two for him to hold that man down like that. Yes. So anyway, Ernest, as we saw on Fox News, they got the ball on this, and he's on this show doing an interview, which the people will see. It's another divisive type thing, but based on what you said, I don't think anybody with good common sense would think otherwise than the man was guilty, based on what you just said. The Walt Weekly is all about facts and trust and credibility, and that's what we do. Okay, and that's what we try to push out to our audience. This is going to be our last podcast for the year, and we will be back on first week of January.
Thank you for joining the Walt Weekly. We can be found at Facebook, the Walt Weekly Podcast, Twitter at Walt Weekly, Instagram, the Walt Weekly, and www.thewaltweekly.com. Please like, follow, and share.